Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something simple but important. What your life look like if you stopped reacting to every small inconvenience, not by suppressing emotions, but by mastering them. Today, I want to talk about something that sounds deceptively easy, learning to act as if nothing bothers you. This isn't about pretending. How do we? It's about creating a state where you train your nervous system to stay stable, even under pressure. Conditioning your baseline calm means training your nervous system to default to a state of clarity and control even before stress arises. Most people wait until they're overwhelmed to start looking for tools to manage stress, but by then it's often too late. Your system has already shifted into fight or flight mode, and your ability to think clearly or regulate your behavior has been hijacked. The key is to build calm as a daily habit so that when pressure comes, you're not scrambling to find stability. You already live there. Your baseline state is the mental and physical condition you spend most of your time in. For many people, it's a low-grade anxiety or tension. They carry it from task to task, relationship to relationship. But what if you could shift that baseline toward calm alertness? Not sedated, not passive, but grounded. Calm does not mean slow or checked out. It means clear, to deliberate, and balanced. It's a state where your mind is still enough to make good decisions and your body isn't overacting to minor stressors. This starts with your physiology. Your nervous system is wired for survival, not peace, but we can train it through small, repeatable actions. One of the most powerful methods is breath control. Something as simple as slowing your exhale can signal safety to your brain. When you inhale, your heart rate slightly increases. When you exhale, it slows down. Longer exhales tap into the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest and recovery. If you practice a breath pattern like inhaling 4 seconds and exhaling for 6, and you do this for a few minutes each day, you're not just relaxing in the moment. You're teaching your body what calm feels like so it can intuit more easily under pressure. Another way to shift your baseline is through cold exposure. When you step into a cold shower or ice, your body naturally wants to panic. Your heart rate spikes. Your breath shortens. How do we? But if you stay calm and control your breathing during that moment, you're reinforcing a crucial lesson to your brain. Stress does not have to equal chaos. You're practicing stress with control, which rewires your system. The next time you're in a tense meeting or stuck in traffic or receive unexpected bad news, your body already knows how to maintain control. It's not shocked by the discomfort. It's trained for it. Visualization is also a powerful tool. Athletes use it all the time, not just to imagine success, but to prepare for difficulty. If you spend a few minutes visualizing yourself remaining calm during chaos, seeing yourself breathe evenly, speak clearly, and think sharply, your brain interprets that imagery almost like real experience. You're creating a mental blueprint that it can follow later. Rehearse staying grounded. Rehearse your response to setbacks. This gives your mind a pattern to reference when the moment hits. Sleep, nutrition, and sunlight play a huge role in this too. You can't fake a calm baseline if your body is inflamed, undernourished, or sleep deprived. A tired brain is an emotional brain. It reacts more, thinks less, and gets hijacked more easily. Prioritize these fundamentals, not because it's trendy, but because your baseline depends on it. Lastly, think about the environments you regularly expose yourself to. How do we? Are you surrounded by noisy, negativity, urgency? That becomes your norm. And your system adapts to that environment, whether it's helpful or harmful. Be intentional about what you consume and who you allow into your mental. Calm is contagious, but so is chaos. Conditioning your baseline isn't about removing all stress from your life. It's about making stress something you can move through with control, not something that controls you. Over time, if you do these things consistently, breathwork, cold exposure, visualization, recovery, mindful environments, a shift. You'll begin to respond instead of react. You'll feel more centered even when things go wrong. You'll stop being pulled into every little disturbance because your system knows how to hold steady. And that's the point. How do we? You don't rise to the occasion. You fall back to your level of training. If you train for calm, you'll meet chaos with clarity. That's not a personality trait. It's a practiced skill. It's the result of choosing day after day to condition your baseline for stability rather than reactivity. And it changes everything. Behavioral neutrality is the practice of maintaining calm, consistent behavior regardless of the emotional storm happening inside or around you. It's not about denying what you feel or pretending you're unaffected. It's about choosing your response rather than being owned by your reaction. When you embrace behavioral neutrality, You become the calmest person in the room, not because you don't feel pressure, but because you've trained yourself not to leak it through your actions, tone, or presence. How do we, most people think that emotional expression is the only way to stay honest. If they feel irritated, they show it. If they're upset, they raise their voice. They believe that showing every feeling in real time makes them more authentic. But this is a misunderstanding. Emotional authenticity doesn't mean emotional impulsivity. In fact, the most emotional-intelligent people often express very little outwardly until they've had time to regulate and assess. They understand that not every feeling deserves an immediate performance. This is where behavioral neutrality becomes powerful. When something triggers you, a passive-aggressive comment, a difficult question, a disrespectful glance, your brain and body light up. Your heart rate increases, your breathing changes, your face may tighten. These reactions are automatic, wired by evolution. But if you give them free rein, you're signaling to others that you are easily disturbed, easily manipulated, and lacking control. Behavioral neutrality teaches you to hold the line, to not give that reaction a stage. You feel it internally, but your external response remains steady. This isn't about suppressing emotions. Suppression implies that you're shoving emotions down, denying them space. Behavioral neutrality is different. It's about recognition without escalation. You're not ignoring the feeling. You're choosing not to act it out. You can observe anger without slamming a door. You can feel it without rolling your eyes or raising your voice. You can experience disappointment without collapsing your posture or tone. The small behavioral choices have a massive impact on how others perceive you and how your own nervous system recalibrates over time. How do we think of behavioral neutrality like a signal to your own brain? Every time you remain physically calm in the face of pressure, you're sending a message. This is manageable. We don't need to panic. Over time, your body begins to adapt. Your nervous system doesn't spike as hard. You start to become more grounded, not because the world changed, but because you stopped reinforcing your stress response through your behavior. There's another benefit here that often goes unnoticed. When you don't react visibly, you keep your power. People who try to provoke you thrive on reaction. They feed off of your facial expressions, your posture shifts, your emotional outbursts. The moment you stop giving them that fuel, the dynamic changes. You become unreadable and in many cases, unshakable. Whether you're in negotiation, a conflict, or just trying to maintain control in a stressful environment, behavioral neutrality is one of your most valuable assets. Developing it takes practice. Start with awareness. Pay close attention to how your body reacts when you're under pressure. Do your shoulders rise? Does your jaw tighten? Does your voice pitch up? These cues are your training ground. Once you recognize them, you can start applying micro corrections. Lower your shoulders, relax your jaw, slow your speaking pace, keep your hands still. Even simple eye contact, steady but not aggressive, can hold a powerful sense of presence. Breathing helps anchor you. In any stressful moment, if you can take a controlled breath before you speak or move, you create space. That space is where regulation lies. That's where you get to choose how you show up. The more you do this, the more automatic it becomes. Eventually, people around you will notice. They may not be able to explain it, but they'll feel that you're grounded in a different way. And in chaotic environments, people follow the calmest person, not the loudest. This way of showing up isn't passive. It's actually an active form of strength. Anyone can explode when provoked. Anyone can snap when they're frustrated. That's easy. But staying composed under pressure, that's a skill, that's discipline. And more importantly, it's influence. Because when others see that you don't get rattled, you become a stabilizing force. You stop mirroring the chaos around you and start setting a new tone. Behavioral neutrality doesn't mean you're cold or distant. It means you're composed and intentional. You save your energy for moments that truly require it. So you don't let temporary emotions turn into permanent consequences. And you begin to walk through the world with quiet authority, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself because it's already earned. Reframing experiences is the process of shifting the way you interpret what happens to you so you can respond with clarity and purpose rather than emotion and reactivity. It's not about lying to yourself or pretending everything is positive. It's about choosing a lens that allows you to grow, learn, and stay grounded even in the face of discomfort or adversity. The same event can either break you or build you, depending on how you explain it to yourself. And that internal narrative is one of the most powerful tools you have for mental resilience. Every experience you go through is filtered by your perception. That perception is shaped by your past, your beliefs, your expectations, and your current emotional state. When something unexpected or difficult happens, your brain wants to make sense of it quickly. It assigns meaning often in a split second, and that meaning determines how you feel and what you do next. If you get cut off in traffic, you might think that driver's an idiot and feel angry. Or you might think maybe they're rushing to an emergency and feel compassion. The event is the same, but your frame changes the emotional charge. In high pressure or emotionally charged situations, reframing gives you the power to pause and choose. You can ask yourself a different question. Instead of, why is this happening to me? Ask, what can I take from this? Instead of saying, this always happens. Try, this is happening now, but it doesn't define me. That shift disrupts the loop of helplessness or victimhood and reorients your mind toward growth and possibility. There's neuroscience behind this. How do we? Your brain is constantly predicting outcomes and updating its internal model of the world. When you reframe an experience, you are quite literally rewiring neural circuits. You're telling your brain that this challenge isn't a threat to fear, but a problem to solve, and that shift activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, reasoning, and long-term planning. It pulls you out of the limbic system, which is dominated by emotion and impulse. Let's say you lose an opportunity, whether it's a job, a relationship, or something you worked hard for. The immediate emotional response might be disappointment, frustration, or even shame, but reframing allows you to ask deeper questions than, what did I learn about my values from this? Or what strengths did I discover while preparing for this? Or even, how can this setback position me for something better? These questions don't erase the pain, but they give it shape. They turn it into something useful instead of something that defines you. Reframing doesn't mean denying reality. If something unfair or painful happened, you don't have to sugarcoat it, but you can choose how much of your energy you give to that version of the story. You can acknowledge the facts without allowing them to become your identity. You can say, that hurt, but it's not who I am. Or that failed, but I am still capable. This isn't toxic positivity. It's mental leadership. It's deciding not to let one moment write the entire script. There are also moments when reframing turns obstacles into fuel. Some of the most resilient people in the world have one thing in common. They don't waste time asking why life is unfair. They use what happens to sharpen their mindset. If something is hard, they view it as training. If something is delayed, they see it as preparation. If someone doubts them, they use it as motivation to prove what's possible. These aren't just mental tricks. They're strategic shifts that change the emotional tone of experience. Another powerful application of reframing is in relationships. Misunderstandings often happen when we assume the worst intentions from others. But if you train yourself to pause and ask, what else could this mean? You create space for empathy. Maybe that harsh message wasn't personal. Maybe that person is struggling in ways you can't see. This doesn't mean you excuse poor behavior, but it gives you more tools than just anger or withdrawal. It allows you to respond from strength rather than reflex. Reframing is a skill that gets stronger with practice. Start small. Catch yourself in moments of irritation, frustration, or doubt and shift your language. Turn, I have to do this, into, I get to do this. Turn, I messed up, into, I learned something important. Over time, this new language becomes your internal script, and that script shapes how you experience the world. You can't always control what happens, but you can control what it means to you. How do we? And in that space between event and meaning lies your greatest power. Reframing is not denial, it's decision. It's choosing to see every experience not just as a reaction point, but as a chance to practice ownership, growth, and inner strength. Dopamine reward loops are one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior. At its core, dopamine is not just about feeling good. It's about motivation, anticipation, and reinforcing patterns. It acts as a signal that tells your brain, this is worth doing again. Whether it's scrolling through your phone, hitting a workout milestone, or reacting to praise, dopamine is behind the craving and pursuit of reward. And once your brain links a specific behavior to a hit of dopamine, it wires that behavior into a loop. That loop can either work for you or against you. Many people assume that dopamine is released when a reward is achieved, but that's not entirely accurate. Dopamine actually spikes more during the anticipation of the reward than after it. This means your brain is more chemically engaged while you're chasing the goal than when you've actually reached it. That anticipation drives action, focus, and even learning. Understanding this mechanism is key to hacking your behavior, creating better habits, and learning how to stay consistent without needing constant external rewards. The challenge is that our modern environment is overloaded with artificial dopamine triggers. Social media, junk food, streaming platforms, and even digital praise. These things are designed to hijack the dopamine system by giving you fast, easy hits of pleasure with minimal effort. The problem with this is twofold. First, your brain starts prioritizing these quick fix rewards over deeper, more meaningful goals. Second, your dopamine threshold starts rising. What used to feel satisfying no longer does, and you start needing more stimulation for the same level of reward. To build a better relationship with dopamine, you need to shift the loop. Instead of relying on the outcome to feel good, you train your brain to associate dopamine with the effort, the process itself. For example, rather than only celebrating when you've completed a big project, you reward yourself mentally every time you sit down to work on it. You learn to say, this is the part I'm proud of. The showing up, the focus, the consistency. That internal dialogue, repeated regularly, starts to anchor dopamine to the habit, not just the result. When you do this, you create what's called intrinsic motivation. You're not waiting for applause, recognition, or a perfect result to feel good. You're reinforcing the behavior loop by making the action itself meaningful. Over time, this becomes your advantage. Most people burn out because they're chasing the dopamine that comes from the outcome. But when you train your brain to release dopamine during the process, your energy lasts longer, your focus improves, and you stop needing validation from the outside. There are several ways to intentionally build better dopamine loops. One method is called self-generated reward. This is when you mentally reinforce a positive behavior by acknowledging your effort in the moment. You can literally say to yourself, that was hard. How stay to eat, but I stayed with it, or proud of how I handled that. It seems simple, but this kind of internal reward system actually triggers dopamine release, and it wires your brain to associate that behavior with satisfaction. Another approach is variability. The brain loves novelty. When things are predictable, dopamine release starts to taper off. But if you introduce small changes or challenges to your routines, like a new workout, a new way of learning, or a different route to a goal, you keep the dopamine loop active. The brain starts viewing your habits as interesting rather than monotonous, which boosts your motivation. It's also important to understand the cost of overstimulation. If you constantly reward yourself with high dopamine activities like binge eating, scrolling, or constant multitasking, you burn out your reward system. Eventually, even things that used to bring joy start to feel dull. One way to reset this is through what's called dopamine fasting, reducing high stimulation activities for a period of time to restore your sensitivity to natural rewards. After a reset, even simple things like focused work, a deep conversation, or a good workout start to feel satisfying again. Your dopamine system is a tool. It can drive discipline or distraction depending on how you engage with it. When you learn to anchor dopamine to effort, to process, and to internal meaning, you stop being a passive consumer of quick hits and start becoming an architect of your own motivation. The best part is, once this becomes a habit, your momentum becomes self-sustaining. Every time you act with intention and reinforce that action with positive meaning, you're strengthening the loop. And over time, those loops become your identity. You're not just someone who chases success. You become someone who enjoys the pursuit. That's the real win. Stress, for most people, is something to be avoided. It's seen as a negative force, something that erodes health, depletes energy, and breaks down performance. But that perception overlooks a critical reality. Stress is not inherently bad. In fact, when approached with the right mindset and trained deliberately, stress can become a skill. It can sharpen your focus, build resilience, and unlock levels of performance that remain inaccessible in a comfort-only life. The key is learning how to interact with stress. Rather than trying to eliminate it. Your body's stress response is a built-in survival mechanism. When you're faced with a threat or challenge, your brain releases a cocktail of chemicals: cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. That prime you for action. Your heart rate rises, your pupils dilate, your senses sharpen. This state was designed to help early humans escape danger. But in the modern world, where threats aren't always physical, the same system activates when you're facing a deadline, preparing for a difficult conversation, or walking into an unfamiliar room. The problem isn't the stress itself. It's the chronic exposure to untrained stress where there's no recovery, no control, and no strategy. To turn stress into a skill, the first step is to reframe your interpretation of it. Most people feel stress and immediately assume something's wrong. Their breath shortens, they tense, and their internal dialogue turns negative. Why am I anxious? I can't handle this. That interpretation reinforces a sense of danger and puts you into a reactive, defensive state. But if you can shift that framing even slightly, you change the outcome. When you feel stress, you can say, this means I care, or this is energy performance. That shift doesn't deny the stress, it positions it. Instead of being something that controls you, it becomes something you can work with. There's a concept in performance science called stress inoculation. The idea is simply you expose yourself to controlled stress in order to build tolerance and skill. Just like a vaccine prepares your immune system, stress inoculation trains your nervous system. Athletes do this in the weight room and during practice. Military units do it in simulations and drills. But you don't need to be in combat or on a field to apply it. You can use stress in everyday life as a training tool. Start by identifying low-stakes environments where you can intentionally engage discomfort. Public speaking, cold exposure, focused deep work under time pressure. These are all ways to increase your stress tolerance without overwhelming your system. Breath work is a key skill in managing stress in real time. When you're in a high pressure state, your breath is often the first thing to shift, becoming shallow, erratic, and quick. By reversing that pattern through controlled breathing, like longer exhales or box breathing, you send a signal to your brain that you're not in danger. This gives you space between stimulus and response, and that space is where skill lies. When you can regulate your physiology, you maintain access to your cognitive abilities. Decision-making, memory, communication, all of which tend to collapse under unregulated stress. Another important component of training stress as a skill is recovery. Stress becomes toxic when it's constant and unmanaged. But when it's paired with strategic recovery, rest, nutrition, movement, sleep, it becomes a powerful growth stimulus. Just muscle adapts to resistance followed by rest. Your mind and body adapt to pressure when it's balanced with periods of recalibration. This cycle of stress and recovery is what builds capacity over time. The goal isn't to eliminate all stress. It's to become someone who can handle more of it without breaking down. Mindset also plays a massive role. Research shows that people who view stress as a challenge perform better and recover faster than those who view it as a threat. Your beliefs about stress affect your body's response to it. If you believe stress will harm you, your body reacts accordingly. But if you believe stress is preparing you, your body aligns with that belief too. This isn't magical thinking. It's biology shaped by perception. Eventually, if you keep training with stress, recognizing it, managing it, recovering from it, you start to realize it's not the enemy. It's feedback. It tells you where you're growing, where you're alive, and where your edges are. So people who operate at high levels don't succeed because they avoid stress. They succeed because they've made stress a part of their practice. They've turned it into a skill. You can do the same. Stress doesn't have to control you. It can become a signal to focus, a tool for growth, and a force that builds your mental and physical strength. But only if you choose to work with it, not run from it. That's the shift from being stressed out to being stress trained. And that changes everything. Internal consistency is the alignment between what you think, what you say, and what you do. It is the foundation of integrity, not just in how others perceive you, but in how you perceive yourself. When your internal world and your external actions are congruent, you build a deep, quiet kind of confidence, not arrogance, not bravado, but the kind of self-trust that doesn't need validation because it's earned through alignment. This consistency is not about perfection, It's about reducing the friction between your behavior, your intentions, and your choices. Most people live in some degree of internal conflict. They know what they should be doing, but they choose differently. They value health, but skip workouts. They value honesty, but stay silent to avoid discomfort. They talk about discipline, but give in to distraction. These inconsistencies aren't always massive, but over time, they create inner noise. You stop trusting yourself, even subtly. Every time your actions contradict your beliefs, you're sending yourself a message. I don't follow through. I say things I don't mean. I betray what matters to me. And those messages accumulate. That internal dissonance weakens your presence. It leaks into how you speak, how you make decisions, how you carry yourself. People can sense when someone isn't fully aligned. They may not be able to articulate it, but they feel it in your hesitations, your inconsistencies, your tone. On the flip side, when someone is internally consistent, they don't have to prove it. You feel it. There's a clarity in how they show up. They're not scrambling for approval or spinning narratives. Their energy is clean, their intentions are sharp, and their actions are reliable. Internal consistency begins with brutal honesty. You can't align your behavior with your values if you haven't defined those values clearly. What do you actually care about? Not in theory, but in practice. What principles do you want to live by even when it's inconvenient? Write them down and then track your actions against them, not to judge yourself, but to create awareness. If you say you value growth, are you regularly putting yourself in challenging situations? If you say you value presence, are you putting your phone away during conversations. These aren't just habits, they're reflections of your internal world. Consistency also requires managing the gap between intention and execution. Most people overestimate what they can do and underestimate what consistency over time will give them. They make big declarations, start with intensity, then burn out or quit when motivation fades. Internal consistency is built on small daily wins. It's not about doing in everything perfectly. It's about showing up repeatedly in alignment with what you said you would do. When you start honoring even the smallest commitments, your internal trust grows. You begin to believe yourself when you set goals. That belief becomes momentum. Another part of internal consistency is emotional regulation. It's easy to stay aligned when you feel good. It's harder when you're triggered, stressed, or overwhelmed. But those are the moments that reveal your true level of consistency. Can you still act according to your values when it's uncomfortable? Can you stay calm when provoked, focused when distracted, disciplined when no one's watching? That's when internal consistency stops being a concept and becomes a way of life. You don't just talk about being composed, you are. You don't just wish you were dependable. You prove it. This alignment also frees up mental energy. When your values and action match, you don't waste time overthinking, second guessing, or justifying decisions. You don't need elaborate stories to explain yourself. You're not managing multiple identities, one for work, one for friends, one for yourself. You're just living from the same core in every situation. That simplicity is powerful. It creates clarity, efficiency, and peace of mind. Over time, internal consistency becomes your compass. When faced with a choice, you don't have to ask what's easy or popular. You ask what's aligned. That internal compass doesn't guarantee comfort, but it guarantees clarity. You'll still face setbacks, failure, resistance, but you won't feel lost. You'll know you're on your path. And that sense of alignment, even in difficulty, is what builds character and quiet strength. Internal consistency is not flashy. It doesn't always get applause, but it's the foundation of every great life. It's what allows you to build trust with yourself, with others, and with the world. When what you say matches what you believe, and what you believe is reflected in what you do, you stop chasing confidence. You become it.